South Africa continues to battle with gender-based violence as incidents of rape and abuse increase every year. According to police statistics, over 10,000 rape cases were reported in the first quarter of 2022. This makes the country one of the worst places for women to live in. Research has linked domestic violence to societal acceptance of male dominance and stereotyping of gender roles, amongst others. I'm now joined in studio by co-founder of Empowamen, Sechaba Motsieloa, and Martin Pelders, the founder of Matrixmen. Gentlemen, very good morning. Appreciate you coming into the studio.
Thanks for the invite.
Good morning.
Sechaba, let's start with you. That statistic, 10,000 women suffering from gender-based violence in a single quarter, is astronomical and unacceptable.
It's a frightening stats that both men and women live in that environment, because sometimes we forget that as a society we live together, and to have one gender or one part of society experiencing such high levels of gender-based violence, and yet the other part is next to them, is unacceptable. I agree totally.
So what are we doing about it is the question, Martin.
Well, firstly, I think we need to get to the root of the problem. I think, just focusing on one gender is not the answer. If men are the major perpetrators of gender-based violence, then why aren't we not fixing the men or trying to figure out why they're committing these atrocities? And I think men are getting tired of the narrative of all men are abusers and all men are trash and that sort of thing. And I think we need to start changing the narrative, and we'll begin to repair what's actually happening. I mean, the numbers you mentioned, it's interesting because that's only half the problem. So you can double that number if you start including male victims of abuse. So it's a lot worse than what we think it is.
Even then, they do say that a significant number, Sechaba, of cases go unreported. In fact, there are more cases unreported than there are that are actually reported. But, there is a conference that is taking place tomorrow. Talk to us about what that conference hopes to achieve and who's attending.
Yeah, so the Empowamen Summit happening tomorrow at the Music Theatre is aimed at getting at least 2,800 men in one room to really surface some of these issues, to say from a men's perspective, how are they receiving the news, like the statistics that you have had, and how do men become part of a solution in an inclusive environment. It's an all-men-only conference to at least allow for the conversations to surface, so that when we frame how we want to approach the solutions, at least there's an alignment. The last thing that we want is to be talking from different voices, not having come onto the same page of the same book. So that's why the Empowerment Summit is happening from men from different sectors, particularly people who are in positions to influence communities and the spaces where they are.
So, Martin, these 2,800 men come together. What are they taking away when they leave the conference?
Hopefully clarity and a different insight. We're not going to sit there pointing fingers and going, you men are abusive and you must stop. We're going to say why. We're going to ask the questions, and we're going to hopefully find some answers. And I kind of have in my mind what some of the answers are, but I'd like the men to come up with their own solutions there.
But that almost suggests, Sechaba, that there is no accountability. Because if we are saying, why do you hit women? And it almost goes back to a situation that many victims of gender-based violence allegedly suffer when they go to a police station and they say, my husband, my partner, whomever it has hit me. And the question is, why? There should be no why, because it's not acceptable. It should not be happening. Is that not the school of thought?
I guess it just reflects what's happening in society, that the fact that we are where we are means society needs to heal holistically. That's why we are saying you can't just have, saying let's heal the men only, but the men needs to reflect and then have an understanding of how did we get here. Anything that we are experiencing now, possibly the source happened back in time in a different context, is try to match those two so that when we get to talk about the issues at hand, we are not blaming, but we are more saying, as a man, you are also traumatized by the environment and the context in which you live. Therefore, when you inflict pain, remember that it's pain to the whole society, and society needs to heal. But the accountability lies in the fact that men are willing to come into one space, appreciating that they have to be part of the solution.
Martin, where are we drawing these 2,800 men from?
Best asked that one.
What we did when we were putting together the summit was to invite men across the whole country, particularly men that are sitting in positions of power. And then later on, we realized that there are young men that need to be part of the conversation. We are making an assumption that young men are just sponge, that are just going to get the wisdom from the older men, only to find that there has to be an interplay between the different generations. So there's a mix of young people that are also going to be coming through. We did social media recruitment where we were able to speak to people in all provinces, in government, in private sector, NGOs, and we found quite a lot of interest of people saying it's about time that we actually get together to have a conversation and see what can emerge. We are hoping that it's the beginning of a platform that will allow researchers, academics, and people, even funders, to come into the space so that the conversation does not just ignite, but it filters throughout society.
So, Martin, let's look at tomorrow's session. Are we looking at case studies? Are we exploring situations where men are abusive or acts of gender-based violence are perpetrated? Are we bringing various scenarios? Are we saying to these young men in particular, right, if you are frustrated, if you're annoyed by your partner, walk away and come back and have a conversation later?
I wish it was that simple, just walk away and sort it out. But I will bring to the table tomorrow a lot of research that has been done over the last 14, 15 years in South Africa specifically. I'll bring 12 years worth of experience in counseling men who are abusers or victims of abuse. And so I'll be bringing that, I mean, there are things that we as society don't actually know. And one of them is that in South Africa, unfortunately, more boys are sexually abused every year than girls. And it's a stat that has been proven in 2 huge studies.
What is that statistic?
So the first one done in 2006 was 44% of all boys have suffered sexual abuse by the age of 18. The second one was 36.8% of all boys suffered sexual abuse by the age of 16, 33.9% of girls. Now, we're constantly focusing on one side, but we're not looking at the other one. So we're raising broken boys, expecting them just to miraculously turn out to be these incredible humans, and when they act out from a place of pain, then all men are trash, and, all men must die, all men are rapists, and that sort of thing. Where's the support for these boys? Where are the centers that talk to boys who've been abused, physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually? I mean, the stats I gave you now are purely based on sexual abuse. So why are we not fixing these boys? So we know that boys have been given essentially 5 skills to deal with trauma and emotions, and that's sports, sex, I must think of the other one, sports, sex, addiction, silence, and aggression. And we get upset when they use those 5 skills, but we don't teach them anything else. So we need to start changing the narrative. We need to look at things and say, look, broken boys need to be supported as much as broken girls are. There's thousands of rape crisis centers that support girls. There was 125, I think, that actually purported to support young boys as well, of which only 4 had a boy or 2 boys in their advertising materials. So the message the message we're putting out there and the actual picture we're portraying are very, very disjointed, and we need to start rectifying that.
Sechaba, those stats are scary, to say the least. But let's rewind the clock a couple of years. And President Cyril Ramaphosa said that gender-based violence is the new pandemic, right? Subsequently, a former Gauteng premier then said, we've bought 100 police cars in order to deal with the perpetrators of gender-based violence. And I think for me that is a problem. You're trying to deal you're trying to, in fact, the horse has already bolted, and you're trying to find the horse. But what about preventative measures? Just how much is government doing to prevent, to deal with this statistic that Martin speaks of, which is absolutely horrific?
I think when we look from Empowamen, we looked at holistically to come together, not just to look at government to provide a solution. The fact that from a political will, the political statements have been made to say we do have a challenge as a society in our hand was enough to ignite us into action, hence putting together the Empowamen Summit to allow for the different stakeholders to come together, whether it's people from research, people from counseling, whether it's people that have lived through the experience and have got insights to share. For example, when you look at men and identity, what is good and what is problematic in how men identify themselves with a very specific binary gender, and sometimes you're either male or female. Or the role of men in family, what pressure does it put and what does it mean and how is it expressed in society, or perhaps lack of very deep understanding of their spirituality and not seeing the human in the other. Hence, so easy sometimes to inflict pain and violence because you're not seeing yourself in the other human being. So we've put together a conference as, I guess, a response to what government was highlighting for society. We cannot have a traumatized society and hope for a happy South Africa. So we have to start somewhere.
Okay, and one of those places we're starting obviously is tomorrow. So again, just let us know where is it happening, who's invited, are seats still available for people to register, and for those that can't come and would like information on this conference, where is that information available?
So the information is available on the Empowamen social media handles, particularly Facebook as well as Instagram. On the website, the information is there. You can still register for the summit. It will also be streamed on the different platforms so that people who do not have access to the venue themselves can be able to still be part of the discussion, whether it's keynotes, whether it's panel discussions. I'll encourage everybody to comment and make their input, because once something is gone digital, it exists in that environment, and people can be able to engage with the Empowerment Summit content even later stages.
Gentlemen, appreciate you coming on to the show and wish you a successful summit tomorrow.
Thank you.